Hello and welcome to Authentic Parenting. I am Anna Seewald. The 10-year anniversary celebration continues, and today I am sharing another meaningful episode from the archive, episode 300. This conversation was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic, a time that now feels both far and very close. I still remember a dear friend surprising me with the cake to mark the moment, with candles shaped as the number 300. It felt simple and symbolic and deeply meaningful. In this episode, I reflect on how continuing the podcast during that season really supported my mental health and gave me something steady to hold on to. With my friend Christy, we talk about the many changes the podcast went through and how it quietly became a kind of living diary. We also reflect on what has changed over the years and what hasn't, how the Authentic Parenting logo came to be, and more. Christy shares how important it is to pause and acknowledge our accomplishments in a fast-moving world and how modeling that for listeners, whether in parenting or life, can be powerful. I love this episode because of the listener voicemails. They are special, honest, and heartwarming. If you are a fan of the show, you'll also get a peek behind the scenes, how I get my guests, plan live events, and capture those little moments that make the podcast what it is. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening. I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Welcome to episode 300. What an accomplishment. 6 years, 300 episodes, hundreds of amazing guests, global, diverse, and phenomenal community, and one passionate host. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a listener. It is because of you that the podcast exists, and I'm here today. Now, let's begin this milestone episode hosted by my dear friend, former guest of the podcast, and facilitator at our live event, Christy Lorisella, a woman of great depth, a sense of humor, and humility. Special thanks to those of you who sent in audio messages. I absolutely love them, and they mean a lot. Here we go.
Welcome, Anna, to your 300th episode.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real honor to be a part of this occasion, and I certainly knew you before this podcast even started, and to see what you've accomplished over these 6 years has been, it's just been really wonderful to be an audience member and to watch your evolution and the evolution of your podcast and you as a creative person and a professional. So really congratulations. And I know your audience backs me up on that. We really appreciate your generosity over these years. Are really amazed by you.
Oh, what do I say after that? I'm blushing. First of all, I didn't even remember that we met before the podcast was born. I forgot that part about our friendship.
Because you were telling me to do a podcast.
I think I was telling everyone at the time. Really? Is that true?
Yeah. You were like, you should really start a podcast. And then you started a podcast and you're off and running.
That's totally me. Yes. But the funny thing is, 6 years, it seems like it's nothing, but also it feels a lot, And I jokingly always say, there are three big long-term commitments in my life. The first one is my marriage of 20 years. The second one is my child, my relationship with my daughter, 13 years. The third is my podcast, 6 years. I've accomplished something in this life. I think it's huge. It doesn't feel like that, the passage of time, week after week. I was thinking, on a serious note, like, what have I done with such big commitment for a public service, like a free service? And I dare to say high quality, right? Because I pay for this. There is an editing team who makes sure this is, I think it's huge. I realized, wow, when you said generosity, it truly is a generous act of service. For me, it's a creative project. It's fun, right? But it's an act of service. It has become an act of service, and I take it seriously. Maybe in the beginning, it was just, me sitting in my bedroom and speaking to a microphone with a friend. In the first year, I interviewed people I knew closely. And of course, I didn't know how far this would go, the reach of this podcast. And I didn't plan on having a long-term, I didn't have a 5-year plan. It wasn't like that. It was just a young female in her bedroom, wanting to do something for parents and something for herself besides motherhood. And I think this whole journey is so big. Unfortunately, the first year is not in the podcast player. The podcast begin from episode 54, because what the listener doesn't know, you have to host the audio somewhere. And there is a hosting company. I pay money and they host my files. So I was switching hosting companies. And in that process, the second hosting company who I currently host with lost my first whole year. And I have the files in my computer, in my hard drive, but I never listened to them. And I always think, it was just like a test run for me. But the content is really good. So in preparation for the 300 episode, I went back to my garage and brought the external hard drive, dusted it, and I plugged it in. I said, let me listen to some of the first episodes. How did I sound? What did I say in the beginning, in the intro? Did I have music? Because I don't remember much of it, right? So I dusted this black hard drive, and it's an old one, and it's like making some sound. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, there they are. It's titled Final Copies, 2016, I believe, files I found. And with trepidation, I clicked on one, and here is Anna. The sound quality is very poor. Anna sounds very young, somewhat innocent, somewhat preppy, it's different. I recognize that person who is asking questions. The content is good. I'm still the same person. I still have the same curiosity, the same humor. I'm still asking good questions, but I'm very formal. And that innocent voice of this young person that I always knew, that part of me, I'm like, wow, I've changed so much. I listened to just a few, not fully, and it transported me into this past. It was like a time travel. And as a form of free association, it brought back to me lots of memories of me at that time, where I was living, what I was doing, what I was going through. Just listening to the audio put me in a completely different frame of mind. It brought back so much for me, and I didn't expect that. So it was like a time travel. It was very interesting. It was very emotional, to tell you the truth, because I felt the passage of time. And I don't know, we don't have anything in life besides photographs that can take us to our past, right? Somewhat. But the audio is different. Maybe video is similar too. If you look at your baby videos or your wedding video or something like that, you can be transported. But this was of a similar experience. And I was like overwhelmed by that sense of passage of time and my growth. And I almost felt a sense of loss for that person that I was and I am not. I'm happy who I am now, but I felt that loss, that transformation, that evolution. I sensed that in my voice, and it was a very emotional experience.
That's really interesting. I can understand that because, well, obviously you've been through a lot since then and have had losses along the way. And I feel like, there's also this sense of wishing you knew then what you know now a little bit too, like kind of like a little sadness about that, even though you don't regret anything or not that you want to go back, but it's just, that like kind of bittersweet feeling in your heart that,
You described it so exactly so well. Yeah, that's how I felt because now I know a lot more and I'm still on the journey, but that part of me was there. It's also still existing, right? In the podcast. That's still there. Like the first years are there. I can just go back and listen, but I don't want to.
Well, in 5 years from now,
yeah,
if you look back to this time, you're going to feel that same way.
Yeah. So this podcast is very meaningful for me, in so many ways, as you can see.
Yeah. Well, it's a diary in a way. I was thinking about like all the things it is. It's a diary. It's a parenting resource. It's entertainment, it's education, it's connection. And, I think that it serves a lot of purposes for people, who are listening around the globe and who are maybe feeling isolated as a parent. One of the things that I wanted to acknowledge in our conversation today was, I feel like your podcast really takes the place of what's been missing, I think, for decades in our society, which is that communal raising of kids. Over the years, as our, society has changed and people have become more isolated. And here you're using this technology to like help us feel connected again and to help us learn from each other and gain wisdom, in a way that like parenting books just couldn't do for decades. And thank goodness that you had gotten started before the pandemic, because it's been like over a year and a half now. You've had to adapt, but you've continued to provide us with, like you said, like really high quality education and conversation and connection.
In fact, about the pandemic, somebody asked me, a listener asked me in an email, I can't believe you went through a lot. You lost your dad. You went through a lot in the pandemic. I can't believe you still showed up and shared the podcast and did the podcast. And I responded to that person. I said, in fact, it was because of the podcast that I was able to maintain somewhat of a balance, stability, consistency. It was very important for my own mental health, right? Because I'm doing something for others on a consistent, routine basis. And it's a good motivator. You can't be depressed because people are waiting for another episode. People are waiting there. You have to show up, even though no one is paying me to do this. It's not my job, but there is this agreement now between me and the listener. And it's not 10 listeners and it's not 100, it's thousands of listeners. And I can't let them down. It's that sense of responsibility and obligation. And during the pandemic, yes, I slacked off a little bit. It was hard. I published episodes later and I missed only 3 episodes. Within 6 years, I published 1 week after week. And in the pandemic, I missed only 3 episodes because I just couldn't get up and do it. But it saved me. It was this, thing that kept me going. If I didn't have the podcast, I think I would have been depressed during the pandemic. It gave me a sense of purpose, meaning.
As you're saying that, I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing also like what it means to be a parent. Like our kids give us purpose. We have to get up in the morning for them, and I don't know. I can see some parallels there. You're like, there's a very motherly way about you just in general as a person in all the best ways. And yeah, when you have that responsibility to other human beings, it fuels you. And then also that connection inspires you to help fuel others. It's a real give and take.
Yeah, it's give and give. I think when I give, I receive, right? It's not only like depleting type of giving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It gives me multiple fold. It gives me so much pleasure, joy, connection, meaning, purpose, creativity. It brings me so much. And people always ask me, do you make money with your podcast? I'm like, no, like money is not the purpose here, but I get so much from it. It's priceless what I get from it.
Yeah, I can see that. I think your audience feels the same way, that what they get from you is priceless. But like you said, there are costs that are involved, and you've made a really strong effort to keep this going and increasingly more and more professional. And that takes a lot of time and energy and resources. I wanted to give you an opportunity just to remind listeners about the opportunity that they have to contribute towards your program. I mean, I don't want to sound like an infomercial, but, I think it's important. You're an artist and an educator, and these things are not free. So what was that decision like? Well, I imagine that wasn't an easy decision to say, okay, I'm going to put myself on this platform and start asking folks to fund my project.
It's hard. I think that's the hardest part for me. And I rarely mention. If I mention, I feel bad. But there are supporters, we had more, some disappear, some come back. I had some supporters who were silently supporting the podcast for years, and I've never known who they were, right? And then he stopped, one of the listeners, but there were a couple of women in Australia who were supporting it for years. And they felt so bad for terminating their support. They emailed me, and everything is okay. I don't expect anything. It's lovely if they support, but I don't want to take time today to promote that aspect of it. But, it's available. If they feel compelled to support it, of course, it's important to continue to bring the high level guests that we do. There's so much work involved. If I just describe how much time this podcast takes from me, how much I prepare for an interview, it's a lot of work. Really, it's like a big part of my life.
Well, and I thought you probably wouldn't want me to bring it up, but I wanted to bring it up anyway. More for a model of all of us really valuing our time and our expertise and our experience. And I just think that it's, if you love something and you feel passionately about it, and the person who's creating it is somebody you really believe in, I think it's important to show that support, and not just monetarily. Okay, I can tell you're done talking about this.
So no. I'm nodding because no, I agree with you, and not necessarily monetarily, but a support means sharing on social media so other people can have access to it. Because when I create, I don't have time to promote on social media, right? It would be nice if the listeners promoted it on their social media, or they wrote a review, right? It doesn't take much. You can participate in different ways to support the podcast, to spread the word about it, to show someone how to subscribe to it, to write a review about it. And in the beginning, I would ask for those things, but later I stopped. It has to come from the heart. You can't force people to do things. And I am creating something, and I believe in this. And if somebody on the receiving end listens and finds it meaningful and they want to support, $2 a month is just nothing, right? With this podcast comes a community. Like you said, we have a community. There's a free support group almost on a weekly basis. And I'm always available for people. I think that's priceless. That is priceless. Shamelessly, I have to say that's priceless. And people who appreciate, they appreciate. But sometimes when I put out the call for send your voice messages for the 300 episode and no one was sending any messages, I was feeling really upset, right? Because here I am. I have built this thing for 6 years. Yes, no one asked me to, but I am asking of the listener for a very little favor. Just to tell me, thank you for the podcast and congratulations on the 300. Maybe it doesn't mean the same to them, the 300, right? But I think it's a big milestone.
I mean, I was just going to say, I know it's not about you. I think it's more about the individual, of course, because I mean, just personally, when you put out that call, I'm thinking like hundreds of people have already left you messages, and like, of course, my contribution, I know Anna would appreciate it, but I think everybody thinks everyone else is doing it already. And so you're probably inundated with messages, so I honestly do think that that's probably more of an accurate interpretation of people not sending in their message. But anyway.
But we have some messages and we will play them. And maybe this is a good time to play the first message from our wonderful listeners.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Okay, here's the first message.
Hi, my name is Bethany. I've been listening to the Authentic Parenting podcast for about a year. I am from Caledonia, Ontario, Canada, and I listen with my phone when my little girl is napping and I'm doing all of the house things. I discovered it on Spotify when I was just searching for a parenting podcast, and I really love the diversity of topics and how deeply you examine each one. My favorite episodes are The Power of Living with a Wide Open Heart, The Upside to Your Dark Side with Todd Kashdan, and Stop Hurting Kids in the Name of Discipline. And there's too many things to list that I have taken away from each episode. But the overall influence of the podcast on my parenting or our parenting is remarkable because it allows me to open conversations with my partner and gives us an opportunity to look at our beliefs and actions together with the help of experts. Our biggest learning is on discipline and looking at and deciding how we're going to change what was done to us as children by finding a balance of what we can maintain as parents and still provide consistency and safety and fairness to our child. I myself have had a major breakthrough to do with my own fears of raising a little girl in a world where I can't always control who is around her and what they could be doing to her. Just the fact of having her in the first place brought me face to face with deep repressed memories that I've been slowly working through and dealing with the absolute fear of being that person whose job it is to make sure that those things don't happen to her. Listening to a lot of episodes that deal with trauma have helped me process some of that fear. So thank you for all the incredibly hard work you do. You can really hear your passion, and it's inspiring. In a world where we can't all be together physically in a community, this work is invaluable. And I believe you're making a difference in the most important area possible. So thank you.
Wow.
What an amazing woman. What an amazing message, right? And she highlighted the thing that you just said earlier about raising our kids as a community.
Yeah. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
I feel overwhelmed. It's overwhelming to hear that I sit in my bedroom and I have an intimate conversation with someone or I interview an expert. And somehow I forget that a lot of people listen to it, and maybe that's the secret to a good podcast. Because if I thought I was, speaking to thousands of people, I would be more censored, edited, and I wouldn't be myself. Right. But I forget. But it also gives me a sense of responsibility because people contact me and they say, I remember you said this in such and such an episode. I'm like, wow, people do remember. I have to be very careful. I have this obligation. Yeah, it's very humbling and overwhelming. And yeah, I like the part where she says, I can hear your passion. Yes, I am sometimes very passionate in episodes.
Sometimes,
yeah. Yeah.
That's a word that describes you. I would say most of the time. You're so magnetic, and your passion is infectious. That's what I was thinking of, that like the ripple effect of your work. And here she is in Canada, and I know you have listeners all over the world, and just to think about that impact that you're having in those different homes across the globe is really, really amazing.
Yeah, it's like, wow, I can't even believe it. Yeah. Shall we listen to another message?
Absolutely. Yeah, these are great. These are so great.
Hi, Anna. This is Carla. I am from Mexico originally. I grew up in the U.S. in Texas. And I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 years, between 3 and 4 years. What I love about it is that you always bring amazing experts, but it's always your insight and your advice and the topics that you bring that really speak to me. I started listening as I went deeper into my own healing journey. And when I became a mom, I was wanting to learn to parent consciously. I was feeling very triggered by the past like never before. And so your podcast has really, really guided me in my conscious parenting journey. And I appreciate you so, so much.
That's sweet.
That is sweet, Carla. Thank you so much for that lovely message. And, it feels good to hear that the podcast is helping people for sure.
And also, I know she said she's originally from Mexico, like how international your listeners are.
Yeah, true.
From
true.
all over the world.
Just like myself.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned that, the podcast has changed a lot over the years. I'm curious. I mean, the two significant changes that I can remember are definitely the music, which is always like gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling whenever an episode starts. And I know the logo was a journey for you as well. Did you want to talk about those, or did you want to highlight other changes that people might not realize happened behind the scenes?
Yeah, there have been many changes. You're right. Let's start with the fact that I've changed the logo. This is the 4th logo, and it's the final one, I think, I hope. And I can post on Instagram or in our Facebook group the previous one so that people can see. They were created by me. Obviously, I didn't have money or funding, to support my little hobby. But then later I hired a designer to do the final logo, which came to me, I think maybe it was in the 3rd year, 2018, I think. I did the current logo with the rainbow, the heart, the colors. I was thinking a lot what the podcast means to me at that point already, right? In the beginning, I think I had a logo that was 2 speech bubbles interjecting like a Venn diagram, because of course, it's a conversations. It's an interview podcast. It was very primitive. And then I changed it again. Then I had my picture. Then I hired someone, another speech bubble. I think I did different iterations. But then meanwhile, I was thinking that whole time, my why, why am I doing this? What do I stand for? My values, my goals, my mission obviously was, brewing inside of me. And as I was getting stronger and deeply involved with the podcast, it was becoming more serious endeavor than in the beginning. And one day, I was thinking a lot about it in the background. And I was waiting one day in the restaurant for my friend Marcy. And I said, oh my gosh, I need to draw this. Like I had the light bulb moment. And I'm not an artist. I can't draw very well. And I said, in the middle, it's going to be the heart, parenting from the heart. Then I'm going to have circles around the heart that expand as they go out of the heart, because that represents the growth, the evolvement of our parenting journey, personal growth. But it comes from the heart and it's connected to the heart. And each circle, and I like the circle shape because it represents life and ongoing consistency, right? No sharp edges. And I said, yes, it has to have the circles around it. It has to have the colors of the rainbow because I love color and we have a diverse community. We have to have it. And I love watercolor. It has to have that, and it had to be vibrant and bright. And I just drew it on a napkin with a pen. Then I went back home and I asked my daughter, I said, can you paint this with watercolor, this idea of mine? She did her version. I did my version. I did my own version multiple times. And once I had somewhat of a clear picture, I hired a designer. And I said, please, do a more professional version of this. And she did a good job. And I just had to adjust a few times. We went back and forth with the designer. And I think she captivated what I wanted. What else? The name has changed too, right? In the beginning, it was Authentic Moments. Because again, I was going with this theme of conversations, having with people, deep, genuine, authentic conversations, and me focusing on authentic moments within a conversation. And my business at the time was growing as well. And it's called Authentic Parenting. But the podcast, I was seeing it as a separate entity, as an auxiliary thing to my business. And I wanted the name to be different than Authentic Parenting. And then my podcast editor at the time, and he's the current editor, Danny, said, I think it makes sense to go under the same umbrella, under the same name. And I said, duh, it never occurred to me. And I went through a lot. I said, oh my gosh, like we have 3 years of content. How are we going to change the name? And if we change the name, will we lose listeners? Will other people will connect the dots, the new subscribers? It was a bold move, but I had to do it. And I did. I made an announcement and it was very smooth. Nobody complained. Everybody just eased in, the new listeners, the old listeners. And the old name is still there in the older episodes, right? If you are a new listener and if you go download the old episodes, you hear the name. Another thing I changed is the intro. The current intro I think I have is very short. With years, I finally crystallized my message and I shortened my intro. In the beginning, the intro is longer and it drags. And I was saying a lot of things in the intro and eventually I shortened it. Yes, it went through a lot of changes. And the music, of course, in the beginning, I hired someone because I wanted to look professional, right? I hired this guy and I didn't pay much money. He created some jingle for me, an intro music and an outro music. And he was the voiceover too. I think I hired the same guy to do a voiceover. Have you heard any of my episodes with the voiceover guy? Welcome to Authentic Moments. Have you heard that?
It's not ringing a bell for me, but I mean, it's been a while since I went back into those older seasons.
Welcome to Authentic Moments, a podcast to help you be the best parent you can be. For parents of toddlers to teens, our inspiring guests will help you become a more mindful, patient, playful, and confident parent. Find and embrace your authenticity. Here's your host, Anna Seawold.
What do you think, Christy?
I'm glad you changed it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
It's funny picturing you like in your recording space. And like, I know this is not how it was, but picturing a man like in a suit with a microphone standing like over your shoulder, recording that part of the podcast. like he looks like a sportscaster, like just like, I don't know. It cracks me up.
It is funny. It is funny. I am like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. This is terrible.
Cringy.
But this is cringy, but it was very trendy at the time. You have to know that podcasts are now a thing. 6 years ago, they were very few. Just beginning. And we all knew one another. It was a very small community. I went to podcasting conferences and now everyone and their grandmother has a podcast. Forget about it. Celebrities, companies have a podcast. And it's become a very saturated place. But I was in the beginning in a grassroots movement and it means a lot, So yeah, I had that intro, that guy, the voiceover was trendy at the time in the podcasting. And I don't remember when I switched it. I have to go back and check, but I got rid of that too. I'm glad we can look back and laugh at myself. So this is another positive effect of the podcast.
Yeah. But also, I mean, you can hear how that makes it official, like you were experimenting and developing your podcaster identity.
I guess. Yeah, of course. It's an evolution. I have grown a lot through the years with each episode. Every time I record a new episode, I'm like, this was the best one. To me, the last one is always the best one because I am just better that day, that time. It's an interesting experience. I think those were the major changes. The intro, the sound, the art, the music, the name, in terms of like technical big changes. But my overall message has stayed the same. My focus has stayed the same. What I cover has stayed the same, which I am amazed at that, how much I have grown roots into what I wanted to cover then. And like you said in the beginning, I was this innocent, naive person. I knew I wanted to cover this, but now I know on a deeper level why and how important this stuff is. But I had an intuition that this is important. And I designed a curriculum. What the listener doesn't know, I think about this podcast a lot. It's a big part of my life. I create a list of topics that I want to cover. I research, I read, I follow people. And in the beginning, it was more so of a curriculum. Now it's a little more free flow, but within the realm of the same curriculum. And one of the listeners recently noted that. She said, thank you for designing it this way. When I first listened from the very beginning to the 200th episode, it makes so much sense. You took me on a journey. And I felt, wow, that's amazing because that was my original goal. And I think it's successful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like one thing leads to another, like the people who now contact you who want to talk to you. I mean, that's such an exciting shift. I mean, I know that's been happening for a while now, but to go from wanting to interview folks to folks wanting to say, hey, Anna, interview me. I want to be on your show. I mean, that must feel really good.
It feels, I'm not so impressed by that. I have to say, maybe in the beginning, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Dan Siegel wants to be on my podcast. But after some time, it's like, for me, honestly, I'm not impressed by the big names and high profile guests because I equally showcase quote unquote ordinary people and their messages are equally powerful. And I decline so many high profile guests just because they are some kind of expert or, a best-selling author doesn't mean I have to invite them to the podcast. They have to be in accordance with my quote-unquote curriculum. They have to, there's 5 pillars in the curriculum. It's very serious. I take it seriously. I get a lot of pitches on a daily basis. And you're right. Unless it's the guest who I really wanted, and it happens very rarely, I invite my own guests. When I take a pitch, I have taken in the past, I usually regret. I'm like, oh, I should have taken this person because it takes a lot for me to get to know the person that I want to interview. I can't just invite someone and have a conversation and it would be amazing, right? About their subject matter. I have to be passionate about the subject myself, knowledgeable about the subject matter myself to have deep conversations and dig deeper and ask questions about it, because the listeners always say you ask the best questions. It's because I learn about the topic or the subject deeply so that I can hold this kind of conversations. And so when people pitch, that's a completely new person for me. That requires hours of investment of my time to learn about them, about their work and their topic. And I don't have that time. And so I invite people who I've known for years, who I read, who I follow, and are interesting to me. And I have a strong passion in the subject area, because I have to read their books. I have to do research on them. I have to follow them on social media to see what they post. I listen to their previous interviews and watch all sorts of things on the internet about them. For me to prepare for one interview, it takes minimum 2 to maybe even 8 hours, days sometimes. So it's this ongoing process that people don't see, and I'm constantly in this process. At the same time, I'm emailing with a guest, I'm scheduling with another, I'm planning for another month or another quarter. I'm reading the books that I'm going to have an interview next week. I'm writing show notes for the episode that was released. I'm writing an intro for the episode that is going to be released next week. There's so many things, moving parts to this podcast. And I'm a one-person show, except my editing team, right? What people don't realize, there's so much that goes into, and I do it all by myself. The planning, the coordinating, the reading, the research, the interview, the questions, post-production, promotion, show notes, social media engagement. I do it all. And it's a lot to be organized, to be self-motivated and directed to run this like a well-oiled machine, like a business. It takes a lot.
I'd love to hear another message. Those are really fun to listen to.
Hi, my name is Jen. I discovered your podcast when the pandemic started. And of all the episodes I've listened to, I think my favorite was the one about the hard truth about conscious parenting, that it takes so much strength. It requires an investment in so much growth that lesson freed me from a lot of the judgment that I automatically was feeling towards other parents that were not parenting this way. Some of my friends that maybe don't share that same amount of strength or that same hunger for growth that I do. And so they've invested their time and energy differently. And it shows up in the way that they parent, and that choice is theirs to make, and that I need not judge them for that. I instead have put my energy here into my own growth so that I can be the parent that I want to be. And that empathy is just a much more peaceful place to live. So thank you for that. I really enjoy your podcast. Congratulations on your 300th episode. Keep them coming.
Wow, that's huge. That's I think one of the most difficult lessons of parenting right there.
I agree.
Hi, Anna. My name is Heather. I've been listening to the podcast for just a couple weeks now. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I usually listen when I am working. I just recently started working from home, and the house was really quiet, and I was looking for a podcast on parenting. And I had, always kind of leaned towards the gentle parenting. And that's how I tried to, parent my 18-month-old and my 2 bonus daughters. And, but I really resonated with the authentic parenting verbiage and your approaches and the guests' approaches that you have on the podcast. What I love about it is that you're truly authentic. You feel it. You really let yourself show and your personality show. You're not afraid to cry on the podcast or, be emotional. And I don't, see that very often through podcasts where I feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm your friend, like I need to give you a hug and I have no idea who you are. But I feel like I do because of your podcast, because you're so authentic. And, I've been trying to model that more in my life, especially recently. My baby just stopped breastfeeding, and that was really difficult for me. And there were moments I cried and I was like, oh, I can't let her see me cry. And, instead I cried and she just, laid her head on me. And, that was a good moment for us. One of my favorite episodes was the complicated mother-daughter relationship and more about my mother and myself's relationship. That was extremely eye-opening for myself. In trying to picture what she was like at 19 or what, kind of obstacles that she was going through and how that in turn, came into how she parented me. So thank you, Anna, and I cannot wait for your 300th episode. Keep them coming because I need them.
What a sweet person.
Yeah, very sweet.
I love that. The complicated mother-daughter relationship is a big one. I've been getting so much feedback about it. I know it's one of your favorites too, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. It was I just could not get enough of that conversation. Really, really wonderful. I ordered the book. I haven't started it yet, but it's on its way. And very, very important conversation. And just that tender moment that listener just shared of her, grieving the end of breastfeeding and allowing herself to cry in front of her daughter. And having her daughter put her head on her chest like that, that's just it right there, that mother-daughter bond. And your podcast, has helped her create that intimacy in her relationship with her daughter. That's wonderful.
Very touching. I know. I was touched by her, but that little tidbit that she shared.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm wondering if you want a moment to share your favorite moment or moments or most memorable moments for you.
Wow, there are many. It's hard to choose favorite moments, but what I can say is every guest is different. And I usually connect with guests. And I think the guests that I connect on a more energetic way there's chemistry, and the listener can sense that too. You know, some guests are very formal and official, and no matter what, I can't get them to connect with me the way I usually connect with most of my guests. And that's okay. But the ones that I connect with, it's very nourishing. That chemistry is very electrifying. And so there are many, many moments like this. But one guest, I really have to mention his name. You know, doing this podcast for 6 years, the guests usually are not interested in me, right? They're there just to talk, share, and they're usually busy people. They give already generously from their time, and they're not there to say, hey, Anna, what do you do? Sometimes they ask questions like, where are you located? What's the size of your audience? Things like this nature. But for 6 years, I've been doing it. And like I said, some of the guests asked questions, very superficial about me, but there was one guest who took interest, real interest in me as a human being. And after we recorded the interview, he stayed on to talk to me for about an hour and a half. And he's still in touch with me. And he sends me, you know, like a documentary, and that there is like ongoing conversation. I do maintain relationships with a lot of the guests, but this person took such deep interest in me. I was really moved. And that person was Fred Luskin from the episode Forgiveness. So that episode, clearly that person for me has a more special place. Mm. You know, it was very different. Mark Nebo was another guest that there were so many moments. The episode that one of the listeners mentioned, Stop Hurting Your Kids in the Name of Discipline. There is a big authentic moment there that I didn't expect the message, and I just really lost it. You know, I started crying what the guest shared. That's a very memorable moment. There are many memorable moments, and I clearly, you know, hear their voice in my head still when I rewind the tape. You know, they're so like, especially the emotional moments we remember more powerfully, they're potent. Let's listen to a couple of more listener voicemail. Shall we?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Hi, Anna. This is Kenna, and I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 years. I live in Texas. I usually listen when I'm driving or doing chores around the house. And I found this podcast when I was really struggling with staying calm in the moment with my kids. I really just love how relatable, warm, and compassionate Anna is. She's willing to share her own experiences, and it just reminds us that we're not alone in this parenting journey. There are so many great themes. I would say a couple of the ones I really like is just how our own experiences and our childhood experiences affect us and our parenting, and the importance of validating our kids' emotions and strengthening that connection with them. So prioritizing the relationship with our children. The podcast has helped me. It's really helped me become more authentic as a parent. It's helped me become more authentic in my life, really. And it's helped me improve the relationship with my children and slowly let go of control. I've shared this podcast with so many other people. I just want to say, Anna, thank you so much. You're doing such great work in the world, and I am so grateful that I found your podcast. Yay to 300 episodes.
Yay, McKenna. McKenna has been a big part of the support group during the pandemic, and she's also a supporter on patreon.com. So special shout out to her. She's an amazing person. She has always something wonderful to say. She's very down to earth. You know, during the support calls, she's been instrumental. So let's listen to another one.
Hi, my name is Ripsine. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I've been listening to Anna's podcast for 3 years now. I usually listen when I'm walking or doing things around the house. I discovered it when I was looking for a kinder and more patient way to parent my children. What I love about this podcast is that I've found ways to be kinder to myself, which is really the root to being a kinder parent. Some of my favorite episodes are all those with Dan Siegel, the one with Priya Hasuri, and many, many others. The biggest thing I have learned from this podcast is that being a good parent shouldn't mean martyrdom. We have to live so that our kids can see us grow as humans rather than stay stagnant by telling ourselves we are living for our kids. Some of my favorite themes and topics are those where the guests are open about their struggles and offer sincere look into their growth as fellow humans. I love this podcast so much. Thank you, Anna.
Those are some big takeaways.
These are some big takeaways. I agree. And Ripsime happens to be an Armenian too. You spoke about international listeners. She is also from the same country as I am. So when she calls me, we speak in our own language.
Oh, wow.
How phenomenal is that?
Yeah, that's lovely. Are there any guests that you would love to have on your show? Either again or, someone who you haven't had on yet, but would kind of be like a dream guest for you?
I have a notebook with all the names, and that notebook was from the beginning, my black book, and quote unquote dream guests. Many of them have appeared already. My dream guests have appeared already on the podcast. That doesn't mean I don't still have my dream guests. In fact, one of them is coming in January back again. I just contacted him and he said, yeah, it would be an honor to come to your podcast. And I'm like, yes.
Can you tell us who that is?
You may not know. His name is Patrick McEwen. He wrote a book about breathing, the breathing cure, the oxygen advantage. A big name I would love to have on the podcast would be Esther Perel.
I love her.
I love her. And I feel like I am the younger version of Esther, like I'm going to be like her when I'm older. I admire her. So that would be one. The reason I haven't reached out to her is I haven't figured out an angle I want to bring. I can't just
That's
contact.
What I was just going to ask you. Yeah, like she doesn't really talk about parenting a lot. She talks more about relationships and sexuality and intimacy, right? That was my question for you. Like, what do you want to ask her?
That's why, before contacting a guest, I know why I want them there, right? What the angle is. At least for her, I would love to cover her childhood, her past, because her parents were Holocaust survivors. So I would love to cover that, but I would also love to know about her own parenting, how she parented her two boys. And I know she was very progressive from previous interviews I've heard. And of course, we can talk about relationships, the subject matter that she's expert in. That's relevant too. So, it takes time. Like I have the names of the guests that I want on the podcast. Some of the names have been there since 2016 and I haven't contacted them yet. Mm-hmm. But some of them I have contacted and I always add new names to that list.
Well, we just put it out into the universe. So maybe you're one step closer to figuring out that angle.
Shall we play another voice message?
Sure.
Hi, Anna. Congratulations on your 300th episode of your podcast. This is Roberta Knox. You and I have left messages for each other before. And it is my pleasure to be a Patreon for your podcast. I've been listening to your podcast since earlier this year, and I usually listen to it when I'm at work and I'm putting some papers away or straightening up or having lunch, sometimes when I'm doing other tasks at home. I'm from Southern California. I was introduced to your podcast by my daughter, who has 3 daughters of her own now and is such a wonderful parent. She thought I would be interested in your podcast because I'm a psychotherapist, and I am interested and I love it. I love how you approach things, and I don't always agree with you, but that's completely fine. I always appreciate what you have to say. Some of my favorite episodes are the one with Dr. Richard Schwartz, the one with Dr. Judith Ravenor, Melissa Bernstein, Dan Siegel, Ed Tronick, Carolyn Welch, talking about apologies and forgiveness. Those have been some of my favorite episodes. And the biggest thing I have learned from the podcast is that there is always something more to learn, that we don't know what we don't know. favorite themes and topics include trauma, loss, relationships, all of those dovetail with my work. And I thank you so very much for your work. I just adore you and appreciate you and your podcast. And I'm so happy for you that you have reached this milestone in the podcast.
Yes, that was Roberta. She's an important person. She was the first one to contact me after she heard the episode we did together about the loss of my dad. And she left me such a warm, and I don't even know how to describe it. At the moment when I received it, I was so moved and touched by her message. And, I left a voice message for her, then she sent me another one. So we've been in contact like that. And she means a lot to me, this person. Like, I don't know who she is. She's a psychotherapist, but a wonderful person, And when she said that she doesn't always agree with me, I'm like, oh my gosh, Roberta doesn't always agree with me. That I have to make sure that she agrees with me. That was the first thing that jumped at me, because for me, she's this motherly, grandmotherly figure,
Well, and I feel like your guests are so interconnected and so in line. I honestly can't think of an episode that I listened to that I thought I heard something that didn't jive with the big picture of, authentic parenting. So I too, when she said that in the message, I was like, oh, what didn't she agree with?
I want to know. I want to know.
Well, we should have her on.
I do want to have her on. Yes.
We can grill her.
No, she's a psychotherapist, and she's a grandma. So she has a lot to share too. I want to learn from her. I want to have her on the podcast as a guest,
Well, because the intergenerational disagreements on parenting, and navigating those conversations are really tricky.
Yeah, I think she disagrees with my approach, maybe not the guests. I'm okay with the guests. She can disagree with them, but I wanted to agree with me. No, I'm just kidding. She says she adores me and I adore her, and she's been a Patreon supporter, and yeah, she means a lot to me, this person. So I have warm feelings for her.
Yeah. You want to listen to another one?
Let's listen to another one.
Hi, Anna. Congratulations on your 300th episode. That's phenomenal. You're phenomenal. This is Julie Kuzmariu, your devoted fan and friend from Montreal, Canada. I love authentic parenting. I love you. I'm so grateful that I discovered your podcast. As a fellow podcaster, I think that's how we met, is through the podcasting stratosphere. And you have far surpassed me in episodes, even though I've been doing it since way back when. And you are just, of course, a pioneering woman, but just such an authentic, of course, and beautiful person that I'm so grateful to know and learn from. I love listening to your voice and hearing your process and insights and compassion and curiosity in the podcast. Your guests are unbelievable, and your commitment to the podcast and your community is just beyond stellar. And so I'm just really grateful for the work that you do and who you are as an individual. You were asking about some episodes that stood out. I mean, there's so many. I certainly remember the episode you had with Dr. Laura Markham. She was also a guest on my podcast. I think you've spoken to her a couple of times, and your conversation with her was so touching and deep, and you went to places that I was so curious about knowing. Hadn't thought about those places until you asked those questions. And I just love that conversation, and I invite people to listen to it because I love Dr. Laura Markham. She's helped me profoundly in my parenting journey, as have you. And just the conversation between the two of you was so moving, and I love it. Another conversation was Dr. Daniel Siegel that I love so much. And most recently you had on Rebecca Ledine about the nervous system. And again, the presence and the relationship between the two of you and what you shared from your heart and your process. And the guest herself was phenomenal and so, so great. There's so many that were so impactful. I mean, they all are. I just thought I'd highlight those three. So thank you for being who you are and for this podcast that I look to and rely on for support and for insight in my own parenting journey, a parent of 2 boys, and just so in awe of your commitment and your output and your creativity. So congrats on 300th episode. I hope that you feel extremely proud. I'm so grateful to know you, and hooray to you. With love from Montreal.
Oh, hooray from Montreal. I feel like I'm getting married or something. This is like such a big celebration.
Well, I think when COVID's over, you need to plan like an international tour, because I think you'll have a lot of places to stay if you'd like.
Well, are you in? Because I'm going to be needing your help.
Yes, yeah, I'll go with you. I'll be there.
Yeah, FYI, we're planning a New Jersey, New York get together before Christmas.
Oh, nice.
Yes, hopefully, we can do that first.
Yeah.
Since this year we couldn't do a conference, last year we couldn't do a conference.
That was going to be one of my questions for you was, what are your thoughts moving forward on having another conference? I know it was well received, well attended, and the epidemic kind of got in the way of making it happen again.
Yes, I don't know, honestly. I haven't planned it yet. Of course, I do want to have another live event, and some of the listeners really insist on it, especially our support group people. They're like, when are we going to get together in person? Like, we've been doing this for about 2 years virtually, and we will once things are, more stable with this COVID situation. I am still apprehensive and scared. And again, it's a responsibility, bringing people and organizing this thing. Hopefully next year, let's see if things are all right, in the near future, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'll be there. It was a really wonderful event.
On that note, Christy, let's listen to the final messages.
Oi, Ana, this is Kelly. I've been following your podcast since you started, and I've learned so much from it. I can't believe you are approaching the 300th episode. I'm so proud of you and all the work you do. I know how genuine you are and how invested you are in this work. Congratulations, and thank you so much for all the knowledge you share with all of us moms and people. Thank you, and congratulations again.
There you go. Another international person.
Yeah.
Kelly is from Brazil, but she lives in the United States. And Kelly, actually, you may even know Kelly.
Oh, she's a doula.
She's a doula.
Yes.
Yes.
I do know Kelly.
Yay.
Yeah, a long time.
Yes. And she's been a listener from the very beginning of the show. So she is a very special person.
Anna, congratulations on your 300th episode. What a milestone. I started listening to this podcast back in 2018. And the way that my self-esteem as a person and parent has changed cannot be put into words. You know better than most that I struggled in the beginning with my son and with myself as a parent, and listening to various podcasts, as well as being a guest on one of your podcasts and with the parenting support call. My life has changed dramatically as a person and a parent, and so has my son. So we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. And listen, let's go for another 300. Again, congratulations, peace and blessings. We love you. Bye.
Oh, I know Justin too.
I know, you guys live in the same town. So
Yeah.
What a small world, right?
Yep.
What a small world.
And I brought him to I told him about the conference, and he came to the conference. I think that was his start with being a follower of yours, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you've been instrumental in his life, and this is how it works.
I was wondering if you have any future goals for the podcast. Like, I know you kind of plan ahead, and are there things that we can look forward to yet that you've already dreamed up, or,
That was a question I was thinking myself. And I was like, what shall I do differently, add, remove? I don't know. I think it's working well as it is. I haven't figured out anything new yet. So expect the same accept more amazing guests. I know who is coming on the podcast in the future, so that's for sure. The rest is going to be the same. I mean, I've experimented a lot with this podcast. I have done on-air coaching calls. I have done solo episodes. I have done the special episode with my colleague, Laura Froen. And I have done the roundtable was one thing I wanted to do more of, but somehow it's hard to organize and people don't want to participate. It was with the listeners, and maybe we continue with that. That would be my one wish, to do a few roundtables. It's hard to coordinate and choose a topic. Some people are not open to discussing topics publicly, and I understand that. So the roundtable, I think I liked that experience, because I want to showcase and bring on my listeners and highlight them and give them space. And on-air coaching calls provides that opportunity. That's what I would like more of, to get to know my listener more, to have a more two-sided conversation. Mm-hmm. Yes, because I'm curious wildly who my listener is, right? There are so many wonderful people. And of course, we have a Facebook group, and a lot of people are in that group. And I know a lot of people very well. Some people just contact me, they have my phone number. It's my real phone number in the show notes. And people are like, is that your real number? Yes, it is. So yeah, I am all for deepening the relationship with the listener.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure your audience loves to hear you say that, because they know you're going to follow through on that.
Hey, Anna, this is Zara from the Bronx. I just wanted to congratulate you on this big number, 300. Woof! That's awesome. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud to be a part of this podcast and be a part of this community. You are an awesome person who brings kindness, sunshine, and all the support that person can have. And thank you so much for all your hard work. And I can't wait to continue listening to your work and to the podcast and be a part of your community. I wanted to say that I've been listening for this podcast for the past 3 years, and you helped me with this on-air coaching, which was amazing, and that helped me a lot with my relationship with my son. I love everything about you and the podcast, and I can't just imagine there's no one like you. It's really hard to find kind and good people like you. I can't even pick what is my favorite one from all this podcast. The AI coaching is definitely one of the favorite ones, where you listen to other parents and you can relate to them. And the biggest thing I've learned from the podcast is that there are more kind people like you in the world, and it's not all gray and dark. And I love being part of this. I listen to this podcast at my work when I'm busy with my hands, and my mind can just listen to it and calm down from the way you talk and the way you bring things that are so important, but yet you bring it the right way. So I'm really, really happy for you and really happy to be part of this community. Thank you so much. Love you.
Yeah. Love you back, Sarah. Did you hear, Christy? I'm the sunshine.
Yes.
I love that. This is like a confidence booster,
Yeah.
If you are not feeling well about yourself, create a podcast and ask your listeners to send you messages to tell you how much they love you and how awesome you are. It's like, wow, big dose. I'm getting this big dose and I'm like, oh, like Pinocchio, I'm growing a big head. Yeah, it's humbling,
So we've all learned so much from you, Anna, and your guests. Wondering, what have you learned over the years?
That's a big question. And I have learned a lot. First of all, I learned a lot about myself. Because when you listen back to the episode that you did an interview with someone, you discover new things about yourself. And sometimes you don't like what you discover. But first of all, I learned to be okay with imperfection. The way I speak, sometimes I make mistakes. Obviously, English is not my first language. Recording an intro or an outro that is not quote unquote perfect or up to my standard because I need to just release the episode. Things of this nature have helped me become okay with imperfection and believe that no one is going to judge me. In the grand scheme of things, little mistakes and details don't matter. I have learned to be okay with that. And it's such relief and a good lesson. So I still have standards and I want to provide good quality, but I'm okay with imperfections. I'm not going to sweat over things like that. I have learned to be a good listener, a deep listener, and ask better questions, listen deeply so that I can hear and form a question based on that. I have learned to not use verbal tics like, yeah, this kind of things, because I carefully think before I speak. And I think it's been huge education for me in terms of speaking and listening, in terms of communication. I have learned to be more vulnerable because I appreciate the vulnerability in other people. I started being more vulnerable in my life, not only on the podcast, but in my life. And I think the benefits are tremendous. And I read a lot because of the podcast. I read tremendous amount of books, right? So I have to say no to a lot of things so that I can have time for reading. I read a lot. I developed a lot. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself. And I tap into the wisdom of those people. For sure, I learned from them big time. And we have already talked about in terms of commitment, dedication, time management, scheduling. Like I have to be my own boss. I have to run this project by myself. It's a self-driven process. I mean, it takes a lot of internal skills. I can't just say, oh, I don't have a mood today to get up and do this, So I have developed in that sphere as well tremendously. So if it wasn't for the podcast, I don't know who I would be. And I use my creativity, which is one thing I really appreciate.
Well, that's a really interesting thought, who you would be without the podcast, I'd like to think, the world is definitely a better place because of your podcast. But I want to acknowledge you for celebrating, for making a point to celebrate this accomplishment, this milestone. It's a really significant thing to step back and say, look what I did, and let me celebrate it, and let me receive the good words of people who I've made a difference with. And it's just so important to pause like this. And we all can find ways, even if we don't podcast, we can find ways to say, wow, look at this awesome job I did, and let me really celebrate it. I think that's important. And, of course, with being a parenting, there's a lot we can acknowledge ourselves for. And I think you help us do that through your episodes. So thank you.
Here is to another 300 episodes. Yay!